met last night, so we're going to do this together. I'm just going to tell the Lee County story very quickly, and then Christine's going to talk to you about what you can do as board members in response to such things as the Lee County story. But it's an honor to get to talk to you, and I'm grateful for you to come and listen. First of all, we have a slide. We're really not going to use slides, but these are the questions I'm going to answer, and then give you a real quick synopsis of what's going on in Lee County. And I would tell you to start that I don't think we're really very different than anyone else, except that we were the first ones to bite. We have 88,000 students, we have 11,000 employees, we have a 5-member school board, a referendum just passed to make it a 7-member school board in 2 years, we have a 5-member school board, and we have an engaged community just like most districts with parents who want to do the right things for their children. So, but here's what happened. What's the community want? And I think it's really important that you identify the community, because there are many, many subgroups within your community. So when you say, what does the community want? They want a whole lot of different things, because there are several groups that are speaking out, and they're speaking out about many different issues. Some want fewer tests. Some want lower stakes related to the tests. Some want different or no standards. And a lot of them, and this is never articulated directly, but in listening, as an educator, you get used to listening to mamas, and in listening to the mamas, the common thread for me, every time someone came to the podium to speak, was, I want my child to stop being talked about as less than. I want my child's self-esteem to stay intact. I want my child to feel good about going to school. And so that's this sub-issue that's there, though nobody is actually saying it out loud. So that's the World Reporting Against Crime. There are several issues that have become entangled. There are groups that are all about the standards. There are groups that are all about testing. And because they didn't feel they were being heard, those groups combined their efforts. And so testing and standards and all of it got jumbled together. It's really entangled more than it probably should be at this point. And it's not only challenging to school board members, but it's challenging to school-based folks, it's challenging to superintendents, it's challenging to parents, it's challenging to the business community, because it got all entangled. There's less clarity than there might be if the issues had stayed separate. So the accountability, this is the conclusion that our district came to. The accountability system has become disruptive to the overall learning environment. That's really what's happened for us. And I don't believe for a minute that anyone ever intended for the accountability system to be disruptive. I think it was well intended, and I'm a believer in accountability. But we believe as a district what's happened for us is the accountability system has gotten in the way of us being able to focus on a positive learning environment.
I have a question. Is the accountability system, in your opinion, developed now to help students or to evaluate teachers?
I think you get different answers depending on which legislator you're talking to. My opinion is the accountability system has become a punitive approach to education. That's how I'll say it. I'm also going to say to you, I really don't believe that was the original intention. I think Senator Mumford addressed it this morning when he said, one year they did this, then the next year they did this, and the next year nobody was really watching the culmination of what was happening. Except there were people out there, mostly educators, saying, hello, you started, you're contradicting, you said there were a lot of things. So that's a simple answer.
To teachers or students?
I think it's a punitive system overall. Okay, so who's speaking out? Moms with genuine concern for their children. That's how it started for us in Lee County. Advocates for the removal of Common Core. Advocates for the removal of all accountability. Advocates for accountability. In our district, we call them the silent majority. There are people out there that believe in what's being done, and they have no issue with the testing. And I would tell you that's your more informed group of parents and business people. Educators are speaking out. Non-educators are speaking out. Informed citizens are speaking out. Uninformed citizens are speaking out. And politicians are speaking out. And a lot of talk show radio hosts are speaking out. We'll just leave it at that. I will tell you in many of these cases, it's a calculated, strategic attempt to move forward a personal agenda. Somewhere along the way, assessment became a bad thing. Don't know how that happened, because assessment, if you really look at it, it's ongoing and it's not a bad thing, but it's become a bad thing. And as a result, we have to re-educate the community. Remember what I said about the community. There are many parts to it, and we have to re-educate all of them. So to answer the question, what can we do locally? Educate our community, all the members. Speak to local legislators individually. because I will tell you this, they too need to be educated. And having conversations with our own delegation, I'm telling you, they really have a lack of understanding of what's gone on over the course of time. And also the genesis of it, the why of it. They're struggling with that. We need to stay focused on a single message. Superintendents have talked a lot about that. We've got to get in sync with the commissioner. We've got to get in sync with what's realistically doable, a session at a time. And we have to focus on the children. Connie's going to talk to you about how we can impact the state. So real quickly, let me tell you our story. In reflection, in talking about this last night, my communications director helped me remember that this really began a year before we ever had our opt-out vote. And we had a woman come to the district office, wanted to meet with the director of curriculum. She said she was alone. She actually had 7 people with her, and she said she was a grandmother of one of our children, and she has no children in the district. And she wanted to get to our curriculum folks because she is anti-Common Core, she's anti-accountability, she's all about the Constitution, and she's an advocate for a lot of local control. And she's not a bad human being, she's just got an agenda and wasn't particularly honest about how she came forward to start to talk to us. So that's really where it started. So somewhere along the way, she came. She didn't get to see the curriculum director, just for the record. And while that was happening, because we've got a really astute communications director who talked to her instead. So she's doing her thing. Moms with Real Stories started coming to board meetings. And I say moms, yes, but it was mostly moms. Moms with Real Stories came and they talked about the high stakes testing. That was their issue. It's too hard on my kid. And that's all. That was their only issue. And they struggled a little bit about how many, but they wouldn't have even cared about how many had the high stakes not been associated. And again, that's when I started hearing, I'm tired of my kid being told they're not good because they can't do well on the assessment that the state's giving. That was followed by, very quickly, the non-testing advocates, both local and national, who saw a vulnerability among the people in our community. So they started coming to the meetings. And I will tell you, some of them were from your districts. And I called superintendents as people showed up and said, by the way, you know, Mary from your county was here last night. Very happy to have her, but could you just take care of her in your district? We have plenty of our own. So these advocates started taking up mom's costs. Fast forward. Okay, that all happened. It took about a year. This has been going on for a while. So fast forward, we're at the end of a board meeting. It's board comments. I don't know how you do your board meetings, but our board gets to talk at the end. And so there was a board member who publicly announced that he would not have his children tested this year. Very exciting. And so another board member, and I thought, being the astute superintendent that I am, that it was tongue-in-cheek. Another board member said, well, maybe we ought to just look into opting out. And I'm thinking to myself, oh dear God, they're actually having this conversation. And then, as one of them said, Superintendent, I'd like to know what you're thinking. Couldn't possibly say that out loud. So I said, well, I think there are lots of things to consider should you go in that direction. And so I was directed, and the board attorney was directed, to get all the reasons, not even the reasons, but get the impact of opting out. What would that look like for a school district? So we did that, and what I did, I went to every department in the district, said, tell me everything you do that touches testing. Anything. And I knew it was a lot, but I'm going to tell you, it is a web. It is an unbelievably complicated, you know, when a spider really makes a beautiful web, it's one of those. It's that intricately connected in every area of your district. Testing is touched. I got that. In the meantime, the board attorney went to statute. And yes, there's a statute that says we must give the test. And yes, there's a statute that says children must take the test. And yes, there are several statutes that say, and if you don't, here's what could happen. Doesn't say it will, but here's what could happen. A very lengthy list, not the least of which, for your sake, is board members could be removed from office. I mean, there's this whole litany of things that could happen. Now, no one would tell us that those things would definitely happen, but it's all there as potential. Okay, so we go to the next board meeting, we share the list, and the board attorney shares his interpretation of the law. It was wonderful, and that was after about an hour and a half of public comment. One person said, please don't get rid of testing. All the rest in their red t-shirts got up and said, please do this, please opt out, please, please, please. And so the board had a conversation, and then much to my surprise, because I have a deal with the board that there won't be any surprises at the table, and I thought we had an agreement that we certainly needed to look at things. But you know, this is an impassioned, it is, what's been amazing to me is how someone can speak absolute conviction, with absolute conviction and passion, and nothing they say is accurate. But it becomes believable because they say it so passionate. And so that's kind of what happened. And so the board, by the way, the pretend grandmother comes to every meeting. So the board chatted a little bit, and then out of nowhere, one of the board members says, I want to motion that we opt out of all state required testing effective immediately. And then he got a second, and I think what happened there, no surprises. And then he got a second, and then there really wasn't a whole lot of discussion, and then we had a vote, and then it was 3-2, and we had 150 news stories in 5 days because we had opted out of state testing. And one of the board members said, aren't you excited you've made history? Thinking this is so not what I wanted. Not become a superintendent to make history, I just wanted to help children. So what followed from that immediately, all kidding aside, what followed, you know, if the board tells you to do something, you do it. And so I did say at the table, this is not good for children. This is certainly not good for our district. But, okay, I work at the will of the board. I'm not an elected superintendent, I'm an appointed one, so I have to do what the board says if I'm going to keep my job. And plus, it's what you do, that's in your job description. And so I immediately got to work on, okay, how in Sam Thunder are we going to do this and not be in trouble with the state? We have just really bitten the hand that feeds us. And so there were calls to DOE. There were a lot of calls from DOE. There was a call to Senator Montford as a superintendent. I called the head of FADS and said, hello, help. And what I did immediately the next morning, had a meeting with principals and said, I have no answers to your questions, but I'm confident you have questions, so let me have them. I did a video for all of the employees and said, please just breathe. Yes, the vote really did happen. Yes, it said effective immediately, but you have children in your classrooms, you have children on your buses. When you have that many employees, you have to communicate differently. So I do videos, and so it wasn't unusual for me to get a video. And I tried to just tell them, just breathe. We will work through this like we work through other things. And then this will surprise you, the reporters wanted to talk to us. And I said to the communications director, I'm not talking to any reporters until I talk to news directors and I talk to publishers of the print media, because they're getting it all wrong. Because the headlines, it was awful. The next day what was in the news was, no offense, but it was inaccurate and it was just wrong. And this is a statewide issue, and that was the one message I wanted to get out. This isn't a Lee County issue. We bid, but this is a statewide issue, and we have to address it as a statewide issue. And so they also, can't the reporters just come? And Amity said she's not playing. She's not talking to anybody unless you come. So they all came. And we talked for about an hour and a half. And for probably about 45 minutes before they ever put the cameras on. And I said, I will answer any question you have. I will be, and I promise you, as this progresses, you will get the information as soon as I have it, but you have to get it right. This is critical because this is a statewide issue, and what happens here is going to impact every other district in the state. So, you gotta get it right. And from that point on, honestly, they did, and I was very, very grateful for that. I didn't know, you never know. If you're building relationships along the way, it's helpful. And so we have some good relationships, and it was helpful. Though we're low-hanging fruit. We're the second one. Any given day, we're the first or second largest employer in the district, and so we're a story a day. And just because it's easy, because you can create them just by looking at our incident report. So anyway, but they were helpful. Okay, so while that was happening, one of the board members was very concerned that perhaps they had acted hastily, and so I called a special meeting. And we had it in the morning, which really ticked off the community, but it was about the schedule of the board members. Though now you have to know there is an element that sees me as the villain in the community because I didn't get on the bandwagon and opt out with them. And so they come every meeting now. It's hashtag Canadians Brain if you're interested. So anyway, so we had another board meeting and they had a conversation, and there was no there was no relenting on, this is wrong and we've got to fix it, it's out of control, but there certainly was more conversation about perhaps this wasn't the way to go about it, because we really could hurt the district, ultimately hurt the children. And so we had a meeting and we opted back in, and that was probably another 150 stories. I don't know if we've counted those. So here's where we are now. For better or for worse, this is where we are. We have removed any non-state required local tests. You know, every board had to approve a calendar if there were any local required tests. All we had were elementary tests that were created by the district at the request of elementary schools. They were like unit tests because we wanted consistency. We had a lot of mobility. We wanted consistency across the district. Those were removed by a vote of the board. That presents challenges, and we're working through that, but those were removed. So that's one thing that's happened. Another thing that's happened is we are, sorry, I've lost my, we're making a concerted effort to work with those that are opposed to high-stake testing to find common ground. I kept telling the community, we really aren't that far apart. I just don't want to storm the Bastille and get us in trouble right away. There's a process we need to go through, and that's what it is. And so now I'm personally meeting with them, and the board members have been meeting with them one-on-one, those that we do have some common ground with. And they're amazed when they actually sit and talk to me that I'm not out of their camp at all. It's just about how we go about it. So we're meeting with them one-on-one. We are also meeting with our local legislators one-on-one and explaining how this whole thing happened, because they've watched it, but they don't really understand how we got to this point. And so we're working with them. And then finally, we are having a special meeting actually on Wednesday. And we are going to, the board, I shouldn't say we, the board is going to craft some language to hand off to our lobbyists to work with our legislators. We need to we want to get something sponsored locally that I think will align itself with other legislative language that is sure to come. But we've stressed the community, and I'm going to stress to you, this isn't a local school board issue. This is a statewide issue. And the legislators, I believe at this point, are really the only ones that can help us. DOE is part of the governor's office. So DOE is not its own entity. They can just make its own rules and say this is how it's going to be. And having talked again with the commissioner yesterday with the superintendents, it's very clear. She can't promise anything of her own volition. So that's where we are. I'm going to tell you this. This is going to happen in your community if it hasn't already. And so I'm going to encourage you. It's important to find a win for these folks. And if we find a win for them, it's a win for us. So it's important to find a win. And I'm also going to tell you that it's important that that educators remain in the conversation. Sometimes we're left out, and we don't know everything, but we do know children, and we do know what it takes for children to learn, and we do know that rigor matters. And there are a lot of people that went to school that believe it ought to be like it was when they went to school. We are so past that. And a lot of who we're dealing with are those who believe we should go back to the schoolhouse where a teacher makes a child feel good, and it'll be great. And I'm going to tell you what we're going to raise. We're going to raise a generation of children that are going to be unable to compete globally. And that is all we can teach them at this point. It's funny, I've said this for about 15 years, but now that I'm a superintendent, people actually listen sometimes. All we have left to teach our children how to do is think. They know how to get information. Surely you've heard of Google. They know how to communicate electronically. All we have left is to teach them how to think. Because otherwise they're going to be gatherers of information, not have any idea what to do with it. Or they're going to just believe whatever they're told because they have no way to think for themselves that there might be a different way. So all we have left is for them to think. And the other thing I will tell you, because this is really, it's really sad. It was the genesis of it, but it's gotten lost. We've got to focus on the child. And I end almost every community speech I give with the chorus to a song that I used to sing. I'm going to spare you the singing. But what it says is, in the middle of a circus, there's a heart that's so worthwhile. You can focus on the circus, or you can focus on the child. And I would tell you, Lee County got caught up in the circus temporarily. We got on track. It's a day at a time. It's a person at a time. It's a relationship at a time. And I admire what you all are willing to do to be board members. Not sure what would possess you, but it's good that you're willing. But you've got a huge piece in this. And part of it is working with your superintendent. I have to advocate for that because I am one. But working with your superintendent to allow a learning environment to grow that will provide children what they need to be able to compete. With that, I'll hand it off.
Okay. Can I
Yes.
just, all of these groups are combining, it doesn't seem to me from the outside that the district's boards are combining to send the same message to all of our people.
And I think that's
Okay.
And I will
We
say,
need talking points.
I will say this.
Okay, okay.
I will say this about the groups. They are, when you start drilling it down, they're separated. Because our group that was all about the standards and no accountability, the people who are just concerned about the high stakes are stepping away. So on the face of it, they look like they're together, but their issues are very clear to them. And if you can get to them one-on-one, the talking points become pretty clear.
Okay.